Hi, and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Rate and review the show at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today on the show, we have Jason Greenberg. He's an otolaryngologist, and his Kevin MD article is titled Toughness is Not Infinite and is Not Defined by Dollar Amount. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you for publishing my article and taking the time here today.
We'll get into the article in a little bit. First off, briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
I'm an otolaryngologist, a general otolaryngologist. I've been in practice for 20 years now. Born and raised in Michigan, went to undergrad and med school here, and then did my training in Houston, Texas, and then moved back. I've been in private practice for 16 years and academics now for 4. And my story is an interesting one. I know you said you'd get to my article, but there's lots of buildup to that.
Sure.
About 4 years ago, I had a quintuple bypass and was burned out and whatnot. And I feel lucky to be here. And I've learned a lot along the way and want to share with others.
All right. So we could actually go straight into your story. Like I said, it's titled Toughness is Not Infinite and Not Defined by Dollar Amount. So tell me about the events that led up to the story in your article, and then you could talk about that article to those who didn't get a chance to read it.
Sure. After I switched jobs and I was burned out and unhappy, working very hard in a small town where we couldn't find another physician to help us. And I saw an ad for a position at the local academic center. I knew the salary would be less. We all know there are differences in salaries between academics and private practice, but I felt that was what I needed to do.
Now, before you get into the academic, so when you said that you were burnt out in private practice in a small town, you were having trouble recruiting another physician. Just paint a picture. Give us a sense of what that was like.
So we were 3 doctors in a small town. And after 5 years there, we dropped to 2. Someone left. And it's tough to recruit people to work in small town America, and especially in the subspecialty world. There aren't that many subspecialists out there, or specialists, and most of them are looking to go to metropolitan areas. And so what happened is just the weight of the practice kept on growing. It was like a weight on my shoulders. And every year the patient load got a little bit bigger. And it took its toll to the point where you dread coming to work some days, and you feel lucky you made it out at the end of the day, and you're exhausted when you come home.
And at what point did you decide this may not be the right situation for me, and you wanted to maybe look at an academic center? So how long did it take you to process that decision before you took that next step?
This is going to tie into my article a little bit, but I looked around, and I did pursue another offer, but it was a pay cut, and I wasn't ready to do it. It didn't seem, there were other issues there, but the main thing was money, and it just didn't seem like the right fit. So I soldiered on. And as I tell my story, I was looking through our academy bulletin. I call it a miracle. I saw an ad for a general otolaryngologist in our academy bulletin at the local academic center, and they're usually looking for quaternary subspecialists. And I thought it was an ad that they had to do. This position had already been filled. And I waited a month, and I saw it again, and I applied. Went through the process, and I tell people this job saved my life.
So when you were considering that job, you mentioned that it was less pay. What was your mentality going into that? Because one of the things that you wrote in your article is that no job is too tough if they pay you enough. That was what you were told. So tell me about your mindset as you were considering this transition.
That's certainly what I was heard. And you get, at least in private practice, not in all private practices, but sometimes the only metric that you follow is money. That was the only metric that was followed. And it's tough to jump off that train. And when I sat down with my wife and family and looked at it, look, we're physicians. I'm always going to do well. I'm always going to put food on the table. And what's the point if you don't have the time and energy to enjoy some of that money? It wasn't an unreasonable jump. I felt like we could make it. And fortunately, I'd always lived within my means. The tough enough quandary did jump through my mind. But I think this really shows your toughness when you're willing to make a change like that for things that are more important than the dollar amount. And I'm grateful that I did.
Now, you mentioned that you did have the insight to realize that success is measured more than the dollar amount. Is that a common train of thought? Is that a common thought process among the private practice colleagues that you've encountered?
Not really. At first, it's when you get out and you're applying for jobs and you're on a resident salary and you're excited to make a bigger salary. And That's a lot of the ways you compare some of these offers. Certainly why I took the first job offer I did, or one of the main reasons was it was a higher salary. And then you get on that train, and that's what people talk about. And certainly you want to deliver quality care and get better at your craft, but it seems like money takes a high precedence.
So tell us the next step in your story. You took this academic position. Tell us what happened
So
next.
I took the academic position, and I guess I can't tell my story without talking about my heart issues, because that's a big part of it. And it's a big part of what I'm passionate about. So I switched jobs, and I started to be a little short of breath at times and have some, to be quite frankly, stinging in my chest with exercise. I exercise regularly. And I thought it was just anxiety from the new job. A change is hard, especially after 16 years in a practice environment. And I was lucky enough to listen and talk to my primary care physician. I saw a cardiologist, and I failed my stress test. And my other public service announcement is to get a coronary calcium scan. I believe you're an internist, but my score is absurdly high. I was cathed a week later and on the table 2 or 3 weeks after that, and died of diffuse disease and had a quintuple bypass. So that's why I say this job saved my life. And aside from the care I received, the pace is dramatically different. I work less and I make less, and I'm fine with that. I see less patients, but I think I'm a better clinician. I have more time to talk to people, and I have a bunch of talented colleagues I can tap into whenever I need them. So it's been a great change for me.
Now, if you were to relive this all over again, maybe not the heart issues, but if you were to relive this all over again, in terms of the professional pathway that you took, is there anything that you would have done differently?
That's a great question. I like to think that everything happens for reasons. I don't know if I would have. This job, although it was tough, I wish I had paid more attention to culture when I started. But this was, there are many factors in the job decision formula. We wanted to live in Ann Arbor. My family has been a great place to raise a family. And this was the only position available to live where we wanted to live. The trade-off that I made, it was a high stress environment. So I don't think I would have done anything different from that standpoint. I pursued other offers earlier that might have been something that I might have made a change sooner, but I think this was meant to be my path, and I'm happy with what I've accomplished in the path that I'm on.
Do you think you would have been happier had you gone straight to an academic setting after fellowship training, or did you need to have that private practice experience first so you could have this contrast?
That's a great question. I think it's good to be, whatever specialty you do, it's good to work in different environments and have that contrast. I think in academics, I would have had more mentorship, which I think is important. There's a lot more talk about that now. In private practice, it's depending on the private practice you're in, a lot of it is everyone for themselves. And when you finish, you think you know everything, but you don't know everything. And you learn some things the hard way, but it'd been nice to have a little more support, which I think you get, especially now in an academic environment. But to be quite candid, there's differences in salary. We all get those flyers every week.
Yeah.
Come to this job with very high dollar values on there. And that factors in, especially when you're young and you haven't been out there yet.
And when you were considering job offers, the situation may be different now. Did you have any guidance, any career counseling to give you a heads up? Hey, the dollar amount may be higher, but it comes with these downsides. Did you have any of that?
Not from that standpoint. I do have an inner circle who I discuss things with. I think everyone should have an inner circle that they discuss decisions with. But you're young and you're healthy, and sure, there's more call and it's busier, but that's good. You'll grow your practice. You're in growth phase then, and you're eager to work and get started. So I didn't really anticipate the downstream effects. I didn't think it would be that detrimental down the road.
We're talking to Jason Greenberg. He's an otolaryngologist. We're talking about his Kevin MD article titled, "Toughness is not infinite and is not defined by dollar amount." So Jason, take us into that conversation you had with your family. What specifically was it about that conversation that made you realize that success is more about the money, that there is more to being a physician than the dollar amount and the RVU?
There's something that I often quote. My kids say this is annoying when I do it, and I can't give you the origin, but my kids will say, oh, that person rich? And I'll say, and it's something from a Judaic text, but he was rich who was happy with what he has. And it's not about the dollar amount. And I wasn't happy. When I was on call, I was a different person. When that pager went off, my heart would beat through my chest and I wanted to throw it through the window. And my kids appreciate how much happier I am now and how much more present I am now. We haven't really had to change our lifestyle. I was fortunate. I worked hard, did well, and we lived within our means and made sound financial decisions. But I think overall, my family's been ecstatic. I'm a different person than what I was back then.
And for those other surgical residents or fellows, just encountering the attending job market and they're considering various offers, what kind of advice do you have for them?
The money is important, but it's not the only thing. Culture is important. There's a lot more wellness and well-being and burnout, and you got to take those factors into effect. You're always going to be able to put food on the table, and you always take care of your family. You have to make sound financial decisions, but money shouldn't be the only factor. Quality is important. It's a tough job. You're going to work hard. You're going to learn a lot, but there's more to it than the dollar sign.
So when you say culture is important, wellness is important, during a typical job interview, what kind of questions should they be asking to assess the culture?
That's a great question. Has there been turnover or retention? I think that's a great subtle sign of culture. Are people leaving? I know when I was looking at jobs, there are certain private practices where there's been a constant turnover of junior partners, and those were places I wanted to know. And you can also ask that not just of faculty, but find out staff. If the staff are staying, that's also a sign of good culture. And how often the other faculty members or colleagues get together and meet. Not that you're necessarily looking for a new set of friends, but how collegial are they outside of the work environment, I think is another important.
And my final question, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
I would say to be self-aware, to take care of yourself. And there are times you got to put yourself first. See your doctor. I'm passionate also about, besides wellness and preventative care, see your physician. Doctors take better care of patients. And lastly, I would say get a coronary calcium scanner, talk to your primary care physician about that.
Jason, thank you so much for sharing your story, time, and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks, Kevin. Take care.